Aguten Erev Shabbos, Aguten Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Today, as we know, is both Rosh Chodesh Iyar and Shabbos, and Erev Shabbos, and Shabbos will be Rosh Chodesh as well. Iyar, in Hebrew, is Aleph Yud Yud Reish, which stands for Ani Hashem. Yud Yud is the name of Hashem, Roifecha, your doctor, your healer. This should be the month that Hashem gives us His healing. This is one of those situations where we need Hashem to be the one to give us His healing. We don't have the cure. We don't have it. It is out of human medical hands at this point. We need Hashem to reveal to us, and this is my prayer, my tefillah. Hashem should reveal to us, to the scientists, to the researchers, to those that are trying, or to anybody for that matter, what the cure, the vaccine for this pandemic will be. And let's hopefully not have to wait until the end of the month. As I shared in the email earlier, how last Shabbos afternoon, after cleaning off the table from the Suda, I sat down with my kids, with my Sar Miriam, who's videoing me right now, my videographer, Devora, Yudazev, my wife, and we sat down to play a game of Monopoly. Monopoly is a special treat. We don't get to play it often. It takes a lot of hours, the real Monopoly. We usually play the junior when we play any Monopoly. But usually I don't have time. But being that there was not going to be a Shalosh Shudas in Shul and Mincha, and the afternoons are rather long, we had time to play. And as we set up the game, the pieces, the little silver menchies, the little silver pieces you use, we're all on the go. I'm about to roll the dice for the first turn, when Devorah says 1 second, and she moves apart those pieces a little bit. And she says, Tati, you know what I just did? It's coronavirus. We have to keep a distance. They have to stay away from each other. And like we mentioned, everything these days has to do with corona. It's all everything we hear about, we see it, we read about, we think about. It all has something to do with it. Call it originally Wuhan, then it was China, then it was Corona, now it's COVID-19, which by the way stands for Corona. And that's what we're living in. And as I said, this parasha, what does it have to do with Corona? You know, sometimes it's hard to figure out what the parasha has to do with current events, if you want to relate it to current events. And there's always, as Chazal tell us, a message in the parasha for the current events in life at that time. What does this have to do with anything? The Parshas Tzariah Metzorah, it's a double parasha with Rosh Chodesh as well. What does proper speech have to do with the parasha of this week? You think speech, we would think, is about verbal movements, but really speech is about our attitude. It's about sensitivity. It's about menschlichkeit. It's how we're viewing people inside of our hearts and inside of our minds. How our eyes, as we discussed in the email, how our eyes look at people, the menschlichkeit of how we judge and observe and deal with people. That's the story of this week's parasha. Rechilas, lashon hara, slander, gossip, true, not true, motzi shemra, even nivel peh, just talking in a not appropriate fashion, using our words in a wrong way. But this parasha is very simple and easy. As you go through the parasha, hopefully over Shabbos, you'll see what happens to a Jew, he or she, who speaks lashon hara, who speaks inappropriately, negatively about another person. The pasuk tells us, ish tzaruahu, the person becomes afflicted. They go through a process. An expert Kohen has a diagnosis, quarantined immediately when it's spotted, when the spots are spotted, is quarantined immediately for 7 days. Come back to the Kohen, he checks it. If it continues and it's confirmed as positive, they get sent for another 7 days of quarantine. 14 days, 2 weeks of quarantine, exactly like the corona. But it doesn't stop there. V'hatzaruah asher b'yanega, says the pasuk, begad of you for rumim. He wears ripped clothing. You don't dress fancy. Wearing the shmatas, the pajamas at home, but not at home. V'roshi yafuruah v'al safam yata tamei tamei yikra. They go and they're called impure. Stay away from this person. They're contagious. Badad yeshev michutz l'machane meishave. He goes into quarantine outside. Shelo yiyu mitamim acherim, that others should not be mitame him. And even, Rashi says, even other timeim are not yoshvim imay, don't even sit with that person. He stays alone in isolation so as not to continue to spread this. What we asked in the Parshas summary, there's one big thing of the corona, of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we don't see in the Parsha, or perhaps we don't. What I found to be very fascinating. One of the things the Pasuk mentions, a lot of people don't know about this because we don't practice this practically, is when he's sitting in his isolation, this Metzorah, he can't take a haircut, right? The barber shops are closed, but it also says, V'al safam yateh. And on his lips, on his upper lip, yateh should be bent over, or should be covered. What does that mean? Rashi says simply it means that like an avel, it seems there was a practice that those who were mourning in Avelis would wear a hood over their head as a sign of mourning. It sounds kind of like those things the Arabs wear on the, by the woman, and it would hang down all the way down to their mouths. Says the Ibn Ezra, al safam, lemala mehasafa, on top of the lips, on top of the mouth. That's where this is. Yate bibigadav, he should cover over with his clothing, right? Cover it with a scarf or a hood, however this was. Vihatam, and the reason for this is, listen to this Ibn Ezra, shalayazik beruach piv, that he should not cause any harm, any damage through the breath that came out of him. He shouldn't be breathing on other people, and shouldn't be breathing in from other people in order to stop the spread of infection. He should cover his face with a mask. The Metzorah was in quarantine. The Metzorah was in isolation, alone, no barber shops, nowhere to go out, away from all other people for a full 14 days after a confirmed diagnosis, with a mask on. Says the Rokeach, don't get confused. It's not physical, but it was a spiritual contamination. And the Emes Liakov, I saw beautifully, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, he points this out very, very beautifully. He says it's a simple thing. If this would be something, Shahadavar Talai, if this would be something that was a physical ailment and it's contagious, says then it wouldn't be that we would wait for the expert Kohen to confirm the diagnosis before quarantining this person. If this is something that's actually contagious, immediately it would be quarantined. Whether or not the Kohen's available, he has this leprosy, this tsaras, quarantine. He would never be allowed to endanger anybody else and be around other people, that the ruach piv, that his breath, would be able to carry that towards other people. But since, says the Rabbi Yaakov, he says, therefore, we see that this is a spiritual thing. And the reason for him to sit aside is for what? And what does it mean? He covers his mouth, that Baruch Piv, it's symbolic that his problem was that he spoke negatively. He spoke Lashon Hara, he spoke Nivul Peh, Rechilas, etc. He was not speaking properly about other people, not treating people with respect, not speaking to them with the honor that he should and the care about their feelings. He should cover his mouth, that his words should not be able to hurt others, and he should learn to use his safa, to use his lips to close his mouth, right? The mouth, more than any other body part, any other opening to the body, has the most layers of closure. We have teeth, we have lips, and we even have a mustache and a beard. The Gemara says to show us how many layers a person needs to close their mouth with. It's not a contagious thing, says the Emes Liakov, but it's to let a person spend time to reorganize, to do teshuvah, to prepare himself to be able to come out of his badad yeshiv, out of his isolation, and be with other people. Each person on their own madrega, the truth is. And I want to suggest something. Sometimes the reason that it's hard to talk positively about others is because we don't spend enough time focusing on the positive. If we build up the positive, we look at other people and learn to appreciate the good in them, not the faults in them. Not to focus on the negative, but to focus on the good in them, it won't be so hard to keep it in. We have to also be careful of when we say, okay, this is l'to'eles, it needs to be said, this lashon hara, it's for the good. There is rare occasions when that happens at certain times, and one has to really be sure, and be sure that to the extent necessary is a to'eles, is for good use. But not always is that the case. It reminds me, as we all know, this past season, this past month, my wife lost her grandfather, and then soon after his wife, my wife's grandmother. And the past week we've been doing the Zoom Shiva with the family. And it's a difficult way to do it. On the other hand, looking at the positive, it was very beautiful. Every night, because there was no eulogies and no funeral, practically. So every night the extended family from all different cities across the United States, and even my brother-in-law in Israel, but in New Jersey, in Michigan, in Canada, and all over, would get together on Zoom, and different people would eulogize, would share memories, would share songs, would share thoughts and things. And one of the common things that came up this week, I think, is so appropriate that it's worth sharing. There was so many of the grandchildren speaking about how Bubby would empower people. Whoever she spoke to, she made you feel so good about yourself. You'd come in, every single one of her grandchildren to her was the most beautiful person in the world. She'd walk in, she'd say, "Oh, Bubala, you're the most beautiful girl around. You look so beautiful." She may have not even looked up. She may have been 90 plus years old, and from when she was a young mother in her 30s, she would always be telling people, "You look so beautiful," and they feel like $1 million. And when their spouses are there, their spouse feels like $1 million. She had that ability to always have a nice word, to always have something nice and positive to speak about anybody and everybody, to find the good in things, to see the beauty in things. And I think that was what the key was about the very special marriage that she had with her husband, with our Zadie, with Sam. For the many, many decades that they were together, she was always his sweetheart, and he was always her love, very much in the classic sense, because it was always finding the beauty in each other, finding the positive, looking at the good, and never a negative word, never talking down towards people. That's what empowering is. That's what positivity is. And the truth is, the chesed, I always say chesed starts at home. A person wants to volunteer, wants to do acts of kindness, fix the world, be kind to other people. Start first at home. Right now, we live in a world, we're living in a society, right, where we're forced to be home. Usually people are always eager to volunteer, jump up, run, whenever there's something public, something that's, chic and cool, you volunteer in a marathon, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, it's the in thing to do. Wear this ribbon, that ribbon, different things that are in style. But when it comes to really helping out on the ground, washing the dishes to help out one's own family or spouse, whatever it will be, it's much harder. That's the way humans are made. Now we're forced to be home. Our volunteering, our chesed, our stuff is forced to be at home, in our own homes, by our closest people that are closest to us. Let's all think about this. We can all start with one good midah, one good trait. How we speak, change the way we act a little, being more careful in Lashon Hara, not gossiping negative about another person or about a group of people. That's often the most common pitfall. That when people speak, one Jewish group against others, my style, this style, that style, they're no good, they're no good. It's one of the worst pitfalls of Lashon Hara, one of the worst cases. It's scary to think about how many Metzorahs there would be if we'd still get this Tzariah these days. And if it's easier, like I suggested, we could always work on building up our ability, building up our attitude about empowering the people around us, seeing their milos, not chesronos, seeing what's people's advantages, the positive aspects, not their fault. And in that way, you'll struggle less. Every individual, as we build up ourselves to be that kind of person, will struggle less with having to say Lashon Hara. When we appreciate and learn to recognize the good in the people around us, we have less of an interest in the negativity. And we could do this, because then, Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll all be able to take it to the next level as we come out, just like the Metzorah would come out after spending his time with his mask on, in his solitude, in his quarantine, come back and acclimate back into society, back into shul, keeping up that midah that he built up when he was Badad Yeshev, when he was alone. We'll do the same thing. We'll start building it at home, each in our own way, each in our own level, pushing the borders a little bit to become more positive people, and speaking more nicely, and staying further from Lashon Hara. And just picture it as we dance back into shul. The joy and the feeling of a Shabbos back in shul together. Oy, we're going to be dancing and singing, hopefully, that Shabbos, at the opportunity to be back together in Hashem's shul once again. And all the good people that we already are will be even better people as we work on this. I'm in on the project. Sign me up. Join me as well. Choose something, either focusing on positive in people and building it up that way, or even taking it head on and trying to hold back from the lashon hara, from the negative, being careful how we speak and how we look at other people. In closing, listen to the story about Wilson, a classic. Wilson purchases a plane ticket. He's going home from New York to LA. He's got to get back home. Wilson was one of those finicky guys, very, very finicky about traveling. He walks into the airport, purchases the ticket right from the agent at the thing, and he says to him, "Listen, sir, I need a window seat. I absolutely must have a window seat." The agent says, "No problem, I'll put you in a window seat." He gets onto the plane, and sure enough, somehow he was not placed in the window seat. Rather, his seat was in the aisle seat. One seat over, a small plane, 2 seats, he was in the aisle seat. The window seat was next to him. The entire trip, this Wilson sitting, he's fidgeting, he's squirming, he was uncomfortable, he couldn't take it. He gets off the long journey, and he goes straight to the customer service desk to complain. Irritated. He looks at the agent over there and he says, "Ma'am, I don't understand something here. I specifically purchased a window seat. I needed a window seat. This is the one thing I made so clear. How could you give me the aisle seat? What's wrong with your agents or the company? Call the New York office. That person should be fired. How dare she give me an aisle seat when I need a window seat?" The agent professionally looks up at him and says, "Can I see your stub?" She looks at him. Taka, sure enough, he had a window seat. He had an aisle seat. He was not given a window seat. She looks at him. She says, "Okay." Unfazed. "Wilson, Mr. Wilson, did you ask the person next to you in the window seat if they would mind trading places?" At this point, Wilson was completely irate. Almost losing his cool, he shouts at her. He says, "Excuse me, ma'am. I wasn't able to ask her." The surprised customer service woman looks and says, "Sir, why not?" "You see," he replies, "there was no one sitting in this seat. There was no one there to ask." Sometimes using our words correctly can do amazing things for ourselves. It can fix things in such a simple fashion as long as we use our words in a positive and correct way. Have a good Shabbos, a good Chodesh Iyar. Ani Hashem Reifecha. We miss you all, and we hope to see you all soon as we dance our way back into Shul, even better people than we are now as we continue to grow greater and greater. Be well and be gesund.